we have Cecil Lammey, NFL Insider, ESPN Denver, senior writer for footballguys.com. Hopefully Cecil can bring us a little bit of clarity. Cecil, how you doing? You're on the Vinny and Robo show. How we doing?
I'm doing great, man. Made it back from Indy and, just going back through over the Combine news and notes that I took down while I was out there.
Cecil, I was just telling my boy Robo across the way from me, the entire weekend you had news and sources and little tidbits on every single team. How do you do it, my friend? Before we get into specifics, did you sleep?
Well, there might be some drinking involved.
Of course.
For the last 6 years, I've made my all-star road trip in January where I go to the Shrine Game, the Senior Bowl, and then the Players All-Star Classic, used to be called Texas First of the Nation Game. But the point is this, making friends not only in the media business but also in the scouting world. You kind of get a cool by association. And if scouts know that they can be open around you and they can talk and they can tell you things or confide in you, that's where you get some of these nice, juicy little tidbits that I was able to pick up. And, hey, maybe some come to fruition, maybe some don't. But it's always great just to be around my friends in the football world and just be around football. It's an honor and a blessing to cover this great game. And, I'm so happy every year to go to the Combine. It's my fourth Combine this year. So it's always a great time in Indy. And, you put your ear to the ground, you might be surprised what you hear.
Yeah, speaking of juicy tidbits, let's get down to the brass roots right now. Is RG3 and Andrew Luck the real deal without throwing the ball at the Combine?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an issue for either one of these players. And you see Andrew Luck with a better vertical than Cam Newton. You see him with a 40 time that's just 0.3 of a second slower than what Cam Newton posted last year. Newton threw. It didn't look good. He was still number one overall. These guys are going to throw out their pro days, and that's fine. They're well within their right to do that, and they've really got nothing to prove. I go back to the film study on both of these guys, and kind of similar skill sets, although Robert Griffin, of course, a more quick-twitch athlete. But these are guys, and, a lot of scouts will tell you, Combine, even a guy like Vontae's Perfect, who had a horrible scouting combine, not only in the interview process, but running that 5-second 40, he'll drop a round instead of being a third or fourth rounder. Now he's probably a fourth or fifth rounder. You don't really overreact by what you see, whether in the interview process or during the drills. Where guys really rise or really fall, I guess I should say, is in the medical rechecks, which are very, very important in Indy, and sometimes we're not privy to what those medical rechecks find, and then we sit there on draft week and are like, why is this guy continue to fall? And then we find out, oh, wait a second, he had a medical red flag from the Combine. So RG3, Andrew Luck, both extremely talented players, and if you look at what the Rams are going to get for number two, guys, they're going to get a couple of ones. They're going to get probably a second or a third as well, maybe even stuff on top of that. They're really going to get whatever they ask for. Throw in a car, give them a Cadillac, too. I mean, they'll get whatever they want for RG3. And I have to impress this because during the interview process for the media, RG3 just held the crowd. I mean, he was working the crowd. He was very, very funny, very, very intelligent, and not a guy that was being silly just because he's a goofball, but he was just naturally charismatic, so confident, so smooth. Andrew Luck, not quite as much, so Griffin would win the interview process. But we know these guys are going to go 1 and 2. It's a different situation from Manning and Ryan Leaf. Both of these guys are set to be stars, nay, superstars at the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Cecil, this is Robo. My next question, here it goes, is what's more key for the scouts when they're at these combines, when they're trying to look at what type of talent they want? What's more do they look at? Do they look at the raw talent on how they performed in terms of their stats at the combine, or is it more towards their proven skill and tape and highlights that they have on these guys?
Yeah, and it comes down to a combination of things, but really it's numbers that you can point to because in these draft war rooms, and I've gotten some insight, never been in an actual team war room, but gotten insight from guys that have been in some very heated discussions. A great story I learned about when Alex Smith came out and in the heated discussions going on inside the 49ers war room there. But you get these numbers to look at, these measurables to go back at. I bring up Robert Griffin, 6'2" and 3/8. I mean, these are very, very important things because any team that maybe had a little bit of doubt about his size, and there were people saying, well, I've interviewed him, and he's going to be about 6 feet tall. Well, he proved that was wrong. And people that maybe say, well, this guy's a little bit slower, and then he runs a nice 40 time. Now, to counteract that argument, there are a lot of training facilities. And my good friend Travell Gaines with API does a fantastic job with these top players where they work out specifically for these drills. So if he does run a faster 40 time than you expect, then you go, okay, well, for the last 2 months, that's all he's been doing is training for this one moment. It really comes down, I've always said this, the combine accounts for about 10% of your overall grade. It's not the entire piece of the puzzle, but it is a very important piece of the puzzle. And these teams feel good. I mean, I hate to say this is a bigger topic to get into, but in the scouting community, there is a certain amount of CYA among scouts within teams because you don't want to be the guy that is wrong. And there are certain players that make you stand on the table where you will say, this is my guy, this is what I want. So with a little bit of groupthink that some teams are susceptible to, that's where they go back to the numbers. Well, he measured in good. Well, he's got a fast 40. Oh, look at that vertical. And these are all pieces to the puzzle where they can point to say, okay, this is the guy we want, whether they're right or wrong in that decision.
This is Cecil Lammey, NFL insider, ESPN Denver, and senior writer for FootballGuys.com. Cecil, now you touched on a guy like Vontaze Burfict, who had a first-round grade, and after a terrible day today at the Combine, you just estimated about a 3 or 4 fourth-round grade. Now, what I want to ask you is, you said this is 10% of what coaches, scouts, they're looking for. What about a guy like Stephen Hill, the receiver out of Georgia Tech, who just jumped out of Oil Lucas Stadium and just wowed the scouts? What players made the most of this 10%?
Yeah, and well, you're very right on the money to bring up Stephen Hill, wide receiver from Georgia Tech, interviewed well, and as a guy that's not quite as big as former Georgia Tech wide receiver Demaryius Thomas, I get to see here in Denver, but Hill has that defense to take the top. He's got the speed to take the top off of the defense quickly. And when you look at this game and all the high-powered passing games, that deep threat, I mean, the Patriots wanted Chad Ochocinco to be that guy.
That worked out well.
Yeah. How'd that work out? Well, not well at all. Well, unless they faced the Broncos and Andre Goodman couldn't.
We don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, Stephen Hill is a guy who now comes into that argument, still seen in my eyes as a late first, early second, but people were talking about him before the draft. He'll probably be a late second guy. So he moves up about a round.
Wow.
Maybe somewhere in the 20s someone would take him. I don't think he challenges for the top spot with a Justin Blackman, a Michael Floyd, Kendall Wright. But now he's in that mix. He's in that upper echelon mix. Because, again, at Georgia Tech, this is the same argument that we had with Demaryius Thomas when he came out. They averaged, I think, 8 passing attempts per game. That's it. So, a couple of 9 routes. You guys get open. You've got to work on his route running. Obviously, the speed is there, the size, the vertical, those things you like. You want to see him be able to become a refined route runner where he can gain separation. We'll see if Stephen Hill can do that. Dontari Poe, big man, 350-pound man from Memphis, 4'8", 40, 44 reps at the scouting combine at 225, just, I believe, 5 short of the record there. But Dontari Poe, with his movement, with his 40, with the strength, this guy was bench pressing 500 pounds. So we knew that he was going to make that impact. We knew that on the bench press, I was predicting about 42, but he got it up 44 times at 225. Poe is sitting there, a mountain of a man. A lot of people think the Steelers would be interested. We know Casey Hampton's no spring chicken there. And he is more of that nose tackle than he is a 5-technique, defensive tackle who can play defensive end. He's an interior guy, mainly a 1-technique nose. That would be perfect for the Steelers. Well, he might not be on the board when the Steelers pick. You could see teams in front of the Steelers jump over them. It really and really kind of change their thinking now as to how they're going to structure their defense with a big man like that in the middle. Maybe Cincinnati at 21, maybe even Seattle sitting there at 12. Dontari Poe certainly made the most of his 10%. We talked about RG3 and what he did in the interview process, and then running there, not throwing at the combine. Devin Wiley, kid from Fresno State. Now, the kid I got to see down at the Shrine game Very, very fast, quick in and out of his breaks, can gain separation. Good friend of mine, Wes Bunting from National Football Post, Wiley's a favorite of his, and for good reason.
Wiggles, right? His nickname's Wiggles. Is that correct?
Exactly. He can get open. He can catch everything, hands like glue. Here's the problem. He's got an injury history that reads like infinite jest. I mean, it just on and on and on forever. So you're concerned about that. You see him before this process as a sixth-round guy. Now he's probably a fifth-round guy. But again, the medical recheck. If Devin Wiley ends up going undrafted, we're gonna know. Okay, medical recheck in Indy came back with some red flags. And then finally, for my risers, Kirk Cousins, quarterback from Michigan State. And when you have Brock Osweiler not throwing, that's a big mistake for him. You talked about Luck and Griffin not throwing as well. Well, someone's got to step up to take those reins and to say, okay, well, I'll make the throws. I'll make the passes that these others are refusing to do here. Kirk Cousins did do that. He showed athleticism down at the Senior Bowl as well. Not a favorite of mine. I see too many safe plays, too many check down plays with Kirk Cousins. I'd like to see him have a little bit more of an aggressive mentality. But as far as passing drills, he did look the best out of the quarterbacks and did rise up the draft board to now be probably an early second-round pick instead of a late second-round pick.
Well, here we go. What I want to know is for all those teams out there that are looking for some little help off the edge at the defensive end spot, someone today who shocked everybody was USC's Nick Perry running a 4.5 40. Now, what I want to know is definitely I'm sure it definitely improved his stock, but what teams are definitely going to be interested and maybe possibly going to select this guy earlier rather than later?
Yeah, and Nick Perry's a guy there, of course, that size at 6'3", 271. You love that size and that ability to come in off the edge. A guy who disappointed in my eyes was Quentin Coples because, he performed well at the Senior Bowl. But listen, you put on tape of this guy, and scouts have told me this as well, you see a guy who doesn't put in the effort. With Nick Perry, you saw the effort, perhaps not quite the production, but then you saw the effort again at the scouting combine coming from this kid. And, of course, as a redshirt junior, we didn't see him at any of the all-star road trips. And I could name quite a few teams, and I've always said this, especially at that spot, on the defensive tackle or defensive end. The Giants have done a masterful job of doing this, where they have strength at the position. They've got Chris Canty. They've got Justin Tuck. They've got Osi Manura. Let's go ahead and take JPP. I mean, they've got the strength, and they continue to draft those guys. It gives them that rotation, where you don't have to worry about bringing in an extra blitzer because you've got this fresh, extremely talented defensive line. So Perry is a guy that's going to get a lot of interest now. Instead of being, let's say, end of the first-round pick, now you could look at the middle of the first round, and a lot of teams there could use that help. I mentioned Seattle earlier needing help on their defensive line. They could be interested at 12. I could see San Diego certainly keep them in California, keep them in Southern California. San Diego was shot there at 18 to take Nick Perry. So that guy, again, helped make himself some more money. His rookie contracts aren't as big as they used to be, but Perry did a good job in catapulting his draft stock as much as he could.
Cecil Lammey, NFL Insider, ESPN Denver, senior writer, footballguys.com. Cecil, we have a very large contingent of audience members out in Denver, and I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on some Denver Bronco talk, whispers, things that you've been hearing. So very quickly, before we let you go, because we could talk to you all day about the NFL Combine.
Definitely.
But Denver is in a tricky spot. They have a lot of holes to fill, yet they have a very low draft pick at 25. Now, it seems Nate Irving is going to be the middle backer of the future. At least that's what reports have been said. We have some rookies in the safety spot. The tight end position in this draft class is not very strong in terms of overall how good they are. So it really comes down to running back, defensive tackle, which has been a void for the last 6, 7, 8 years, and getting younger at corner. But it's hard to think that they're going to get younger at corner because behind Champ and Andre Goodman, you have nothing but youth. So what I want to ask you, what are you hearing out of Denver for that first?
Well, first and foremost, we talked about Robert Griffin, and reports came out, it was in fact good friend Bill Williamson that ran with it. Something that we had heard around Denver in October, I think, was the first time I heard that the Broncos would have interest in Robert Griffin. They really did their homework on Robert Griffin. Now, from 25 to 2, guys, I mean, that's almost impossible. You see what the Falcons did for Julio Jones last year in catapulting them and getting up and trading up with Cleveland, setting Cleveland up for this draft. With so many teams, Washington would give whatever. I mean, Mike Shanahan would give a lung to get Robert Griffin. I don't think the Broncos are in a position to get RG3. So we'll throw that out the window, but just know that the interest is there, and it was there back during the college football regular season. It was there very, very early. I see that as a pipe dream to get RG3. Your quarterbacks are coming through free agency. I'll talk about that a little bit later. You brought up Nate Irving. From what I've gathered from my sources, the Ravens are going to do their damnedest to keep Jameel McClain around. That was the player through free agency that I wanted the Broncos to get more than anybody else in trade, more than Brandon Carr, more than Mike Tolbert.
Why is that?
More than making a run at Vincent Jackson. Jameel McClain filled in this last season for Ray Lewis when Lewis had the toe injury. Ravens went 5-0. You think, okay, well, yeah, they got a strong defense, whatever. And yes, that's very true. They do. But it was McClain who was calling the defensive audibles. This kid is very smart. He's very strong. He's stuck around. He's learned in Baltimore from one of the best in Ray Lewis. Perfect fit at the inside linebacker position. Nate Irving is such a question mark. I think Joe Mays is gone in free agency. Sure, you can sign him to a sweetheart deal, whatever. I don't see that as a reasonable option for the Denver Broncos. And listen, I love Joe Mays. He's just not good enough at that position. You need the Al Wilson again. You need Al Wilson 2.0. This Broncos defense hasn't been the same since that unfortunate neck injury took Al Wilson out of the game. Jameel McClain is that guy. He's the gem, the kind of the under-the-radar gem of the free agent class at the inside linebacker position. But from what I've gathered, and Baltimore knows it. A lot of people out there may not be as familiar with this game, but Baltimore knows this is the guy that takes over for Ray Lewis when Ray Lewis is done at the end of 2012, most likely. So they're going to do everything they can. Here's the problem. They got to pay Ray Rice. They're probably going to franchise him. They're trying to work out a long-term extension. Joe Flacco wants top 5 quarterback money. That's a lot. They may not have the dollars, and the Broncos have $50 million to play with. John Elway, during his press conference at the Combine, off my question, said, Mr. Bowlen will give us every resource possible. People want to say, oh, the Broncos are broke, or they don't have the money. No. They've got the cash. They've got the cap. They could be bigger players in free agency, and this is where Vincent Jackson would come in. Bring him back to Colorado. He was a high school star in the Colorado Springs. He was a collegiate star up in Greeley at UNC. Bring him back to Colorado. It's going to take a lot of money to do it, but they have the money to do it, and they have the need to do it because, in my eyes, you move Eric Decker to the slot. I love Eric Decker, but he can't gain separation. You can press him all day, get in his back pocket, and he's never open. And what do we know about Tebow? If you're not open, he's not going to throw it. He's not going to make those tight window throws. So put Decker in the slot. If you get a guy like Vincent Jackson to start opposite Demaryius Thomas, it gives you some punch in the passing game. Now, Nate Irving aside, a big question mark there. Another big question mark, those 2 safeties you mentioned. Raheem Moore, frankly, just looked lost this last season. Can he elevate his game? And then Quentin Carter, who was playing out of position at free safety, by the way, looked decent at times. Still, he's a strong safety. You want him to take over for Dawkins. We'll see if Dawkins ends up retiring. At the tight end spot, I always kind of chuckle when I see the Broncos have a tight end in the mock drafts. You know, hey, they're going to take a tight end. They don't have anybody. I expect them to re-sign Daniel Fells in free agency.
And drafted 2 tight ends last year.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got Julius Thomas. Again, high ankle sprain took him out. But at training camp, within 5 days of training camp last year, he went from a 4th-round pick from Portland State to running with the ones. The kid has talent, and I will say this until it's going to be proven this year because you got to prove yourself quickly in the NFL. You can't just hang around. But Julius Thomas has Gates-like upside. That's the honest truth, the way that he plays this game. But can he develop his raw skill set? Virgil Green is there, good pass catcher, not really a good blocker. And I will highlight this. John Fox doesn't use the tight end. Yes, it would be great for Timmy because guess what? Aaron Hernandez and Tim Tebow, that's pretty good down in Florida. But let me tell you this, Wesley Walls, we all remember him from the days in Carolina.
That's right.
He went from an 80-catch guy to a 35-catch guy. Look at the numbers. As soon as John Fox arrives in Carolina, Walls' numbers cut in half. Guy just doesn't use the tight end position. So I don't see that as being a need for this team. D tackle, they liked on Terry Poe. He's probably not going to be there.
You don't think he's going to be there at 25? You think his 10% of the combine today made him jump up that high? Because previously he was ranked as the 4th best defensive tackle.
Right.
Are you saying he's the first D tackle taken?
No, that'll probably be Michael Brockers, just because Brockers, everyone's tossing around JPP as the comparison. I'm an LSU honk. I know Brockers' agent. I know Brockers' game. I'm not going to put him on JPP's level, but he has that potential. He never fulfilled that potential, and that's, I guess, the intriguing part about Michael Brockers from LSU. I could see him going top 10, probably 9 to Carolina. As far as Dontari Poe, Pittsburgh's sitting right in front of him. You know, if Pittsburgh was behind Denver, then I think, okay, Denver maybe can steal him away, but Pittsburgh's right there. So if Cincinnati passes on this kid, if Seattle passes on this kid, then it's going to get to Pitt right in front of Denver, and Pitt would probably take Dontari Poe. Jerrell Worthy should be there. I don't think Devin Still's going to be there. There's going to be, it's all about pass rushers, quarterbacks, and that's the premium. It's a quarterback-driven league. It's a quarterback-desperate league, and it's desperate to get after those quarterbacks. So these D tackles, these DNs, very, very important for this class. Running back, you can get in the second round Doug Martin from Boise State, who had a very good Senior Bowl, very good scouting combine, great interview.
Does he last? Does Doug Martin last to the Broncos' second round pick, or are they going to have to make some trades to get up there very quickly? Because we have 30 seconds left with you, and I know Denver's wanting to know this.
You'd have to maneuver a little bit, but they're at 57 in the second round. Ray Rice was a second-round pick, and he was 55. So there's a chance that Martin could be there. And cornerback, you can get a cornerback in the third round, Tremaine Johnson, the kid from Montana, and Josh Norman, my guy from Coastal Carolina.
Cecil Lammey, NFL Insider, ESPN, Denver, senior writer for FootballGuys.com. Cecil, one name. Who does Denver take at 25?
They're going to take Jerrell Worthy.
Jerrell Worthy. All right, Denver fans, you heard it here. Cecil Lammey.